Emotions are feelings that are polarized and incomplete and therefore, a sense, lies. A lie is an exaggeration or minimization of some perception. What if I was to tell you that the emotions that you feel are not exactly the truth? In fact, they're lies. Lies about reality. They're subjective interpretations of your reality. So let me elaborate on that so I can explain that. Let's say you meet somebody that you're attracted to. In fact, you're infatuated with. And you're conscious of their upsides and blind, ignorant, or unconscious of some of their downsides. Now, most people have had a moment like that when they first meet somebody and they're a little enamored and they think, wow, this one's different. This is going to have more positives and negatives to it. And you end up getting enamored and you end up having your amygdala activated, which is a survival area of the brain that wants to consume prey and avoid predator. And so it creates an impulse. It assigns a valency to your interpretation, sensory perception, stores it as an episodic memory in the hippocampus, which is adjacent to it, and gives you an impulse to seek out that thing that you are infatuated with, because you're perceiving more advantages and disadvantages, more positives and negatives. You're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides. Your unconsciousness is really a form of ignorance. But as a result of it, you have now a joyful emotion because you're seeing that they're exceeding your expectations. So you have a joy, you have a happy. You even say with a false causality and a false attribution bias, you make me happy when you're first with them. And then what happens is days or weeks, maybe months, you start discovering some of the downsides, some of the things that you are ignoring. Even though your intuition may be whispering them to initially, you ignored the intuition with your impulse and your animal passion, and you basically sought this individual out. But slowly but surely, one day after another, you gradually pick up a few of the downsides of this individual. So the impulse to seek them out and the infatuation starts to wane. We have what is called a hedonic adaptation. And anytime we get a little bit happier like that, our system automatically counterbalances that to bring us back to a set point. Same thing if we go down the opposite direction. It goes back up again. So what happens, we get a little infatuated, we're blind to the downsides, we discover over time some of the downsides, and we calm down the infatuation and calm down the attraction and calm down the impulse to have them. I can't live without them. I'm frightened if somebody takes them away. To calm down and to eventually get them back in equilibrium. And you eventually, over time, discover that they had both upsides and downsides. Everybody does. And the behaviors that you thought were upsides, you discover some of the downsides of the behaviors. And eventually you come to see both sides of that individual simultaneously, and you finally love that individual. While you're infatuated with them, you're seeing the upsides without the downsides. And you have an emotion. And that emotion activates your cerebellum and makes you have motor coordination to go and seek it out. You seek with an impulse and attract the things that you have an emotion of attraction to and you're infatuated with. So anytime you see more positives and negatives and pleasures and pains, more gains and losses, more advantage and disadvantage, you have an impulse towards it. And your misinterpretation runs your life. You're not actually running your life. Your impulse of your subcortical area of your brain is running your life. You're out of your executive center, which is the seat of the real self, and you're down in your amygdala and you're reacting like an animal trying to capture prey. And you want to quickly, impulsively do that. And then you go, oh, wow. And you realize within weeks, possibly days or weeks or months, that how gullible you were to the misinterpretation you had. So you had an emotion because you lied to yourself about what was there. You saw the positives and you ignored the negatives, and now you're seeing both sides, and that emotion was a distortion in your perception that you chose to believe. So that emotion was a lie. Emotions are polarized perceptions, positive without negative or negative without positive. And then what happens is you eventually, those things come down with hedonic adaptation and hedonic treadmill to a set point where they're more balanced. And then instead of being infatuated with them, you get to just love them. When you love somebody, you see both sides simultaneously, the things you like and dislike, and you're honoring both sides. When you're infatuated, you're only seeing one side. Now, this same thing can occur on the opposite side. You can meet somebody and you go, whoa, stay away from this person, danger. And you can resent this person, you know, and you're now conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. And you desensitize to it over time if you're surrounded by it over time. But slowly but surely, the thing you think is terrible, a day, a week, or a year later, you find out that, oh, maybe there's some blessings to that. That behavior actually catalyzed independence and more of a less gullibility and more skeptical understanding, more objective views, asked new questions. It became resourceful. It made me more think about running my own business and not dependent on somebody because of that terrible boss. And then you find out that there were upsides to the downside over time. And then you all of a sudden realize that your interpretation initially, that was all downside, just like when you're infatuated, all upside, or more upside and more downside. You eventually realize that there was both sides. When you're able to see simultaneously both sides, you're seeing things more objectively, more neutral. When you're seeing things only one side and you're polarized to seek or avoid with an instinct or seek with an impulse, you now have an emotion. Emotions are feelings that are polarized and incomplete and therefore, a sense, lies. A lie is an exaggeration or minimization of some perception. You're exaggerating the positives, minimizing the negatives. We call that a false positive, where we're exaggerating the positives and aware of the positives, unaware of the negatives, and a false negative, unaware of the negatives. Or a subjective confirmation bias on the positives and a subjective disconfirmation on the negatives. And this perception, this distorted perception, we call it emotion. Emotions are stored in the hippocampus and stored there in the subconscious mind, if you will, for you to make sure that if you see something we think is terrible, is to protect you from that again, or something you think is terrific, to grab that again. But the reality is, it's a misinterpretation. Eventually, you find out that the very predator that you think is so terrible strengthens you, makes you independent, and drives you, and makes you the entrepreneur, and the other one makes you dependent. When somebody supports your values, you become juvenilely dependent. When somebody challenges your values, you become more precocious independent. And maximum growth and development occurs at the border of those two. You actually need both. So anytime you're labeling one or the other and not seeing both, you're in a sense distorting the whole picture. Because inside that person that you think has got all positives out negatives, you discover over time there's negatives to it. And in that terrible event, you find positives to it. So why have the wisdom of the ages when you can have the wisdom of the ages without the aging process? Why have the wisdom of the ages without over time when you can have it by asking the right question? See, if you ask questions, what's the benefit of that thing that's terrible and what's the drawback of that thing that's not? You bring yourself back into balance quickly and stabilize your emotions, see things objectively, don't get run from our external circumstances, don't create false attribution biases and contributions. They're the cause of my happy, they're the cause of my sad. Then you realize that you're the cause of your own happy and sad because you're the one that perceived it. And if you change the perception, you change the feeling. Now, I'm not against feelings. I think feelings are magnificent, but I'm interested in the feelings of gratitude and love and inspiration and enthusiasm and certainty and presence. The ones that are the joy and sorrows are the ones that distort, because that means you've exceeded expectation or not met up to expectation. And these expectations may not even be sound. They may be moral hypocrisies that you're running and projecting onto the world about life's supposed to be one-sided. And life isn't. Life's got two sides. Every human being, if you look carefully, if I went to you and I said, you're always nice, you're never mean, you wouldn't believe it. If I said, you're always mean, you're never nice, you wouldn't believe it. If I said, sometimes you're nice, sometimes you're mean, you would believe it immediately. So anytime we have an imbalanced ratio of perception, it's not believable in our brain. It's believable when we actually see both sides. So instead of letting the emotions, which are incomplete awarenesses and distortions of reality, run you and then cause all of your autonomic nervous system to fire and cause you to seek and avoid, and you're basically an automaton reacting to misinterpretations, why not ask new sets of questions, bring yourself back into balance, see the objective fact and truth that's there, that people have both sides and events have both sides, and then instead of being victim of history and being run by the outside world, you run from within. And you're now master of your destiny instead of victim of your history. Now, I've said that in many different angles because I find that people get trapped in these emotions and want to run their stories and dramatize their life. And that's a lot of draining energy on something that's not even true. So what I do is I hold people accountable. When I do the breakthrough experience seminar that I do, been doing it for 35 plus years, I hold people accountable to look for both sides. And after doing 125,000 people in that program and helping people see that there's two sides to it, and that's not even that hard to do if they just stop and hold yourself accountable, they realize that these things that they thought were emotions that are running their life and the drama and the stories they were telling are BS. They're not even complete awarenesses. And the second they see both sides there, actually the story that they see is thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. And they love themselves. And that's why I teach the breakthrough experience, so people can transcend the emotional baggage that they carry and the incomplete awarenesses by asking astute questions that help balance the mind and liberate the mind. And when all of a sudden they're not run by this external thing. I know that everybody here has had a moment when they've been highly resentful and they couldn't sleep, and highly infatuated and they couldn't sleep. Well, just take that to any degree. The milder degree, the less disturbance of sleep. The more extreme it is, the more intrusive the thoughts. That's why emotions that are extreme are really stored there. In a sense, we think they're there to protect us from predator and prey, to capture prey and avoid predator. But if we balance them and transform them, every opportunity in life, every experience in life has the capacity to be turned into something you can love. And then you don't have the baggage. You don't sit there and act like an animal with predator and prey avoidance and seeking mechanisms and the world running you on the outside. You get to run you from the inside. And that's what I teach people in the breakthrough, and I show them how to do it. And I've yet to see that anything that they've experienced in their physical body, I can show them how to turn it into something they can be thankful for and feel love for. And then you get to have more meaning in life, the mean between the pair of opposites. So emotions are lies. They're basically incomplete awarenesses. They make you emote and get out dramatizing these incomplete awarenesses. And I'm a firm believer of actually going in there and turning those emotional polarities into synthesized transcendental states of love and appreciation, inspiration, enthusiasm, certainty, and presence. So in the breakthrough experience, if you'd like to have a transcendent state where you have feelings of gratitude for life, come and let me show you how to ask the right questions to see these emotional experiences that you think are the cause of your problems and balance them out and liberate you and free you up from that and make you realize that there's nothing but love. All else was an illusion. And therefore, the emotions that you had and carried around and stored as baggage are your lies. So if you'd like to live truthfully in your life and authentically in your life, I really believe that everything that's going on in your life is trying to help you live authentically. So that's why I want to take a moment to talk about emotions or lies, to make you stop and reflect and think about that. But come to the breakthrough experience so I can show you actually how to do it so you have that tool for the rest of your life. And if you learn the Demartini method of doing that, you'll be surprised on how much baggage, instead of carrying it around, you can just lift yourself from baggage. Instead of blaming things on the outside or blaming you on the inside, there's nothing to blame. There's just something to appreciate and love. So come to the breakthrough experience and let me show you how to transform the lied emotions and turn them into something that you're truly grateful for in life.